If you trust somebody, you can do things that you thought were impossible. So I mentioned earlier that I'm teaching fifth graders. I teach at an inner city school in New York City, and this is the youngest grade of students that I've ever taught before, and so it was a little bit of a learning curve for me. I teach math to fifth graders. Any math people out there? 15 of you. Good, welcome. I don't actually really like math very much. My kids ask me, like, when am I going to use this? And I'm like, you're not. I'm not going to do it. No, I mean, really, you're not, unless you go into a math-related field. But I never use bicep curls either. Like, I've never gone home to, like, pick something up off the floor and just been like. But they make your arms strong for other things. Math makes your mind strong. But for me, it's not really about the math. It's about the kids. I really care about kids. I care about young people. I believe that God has a unique and important destiny for every single person. Big or small, all of our destinies are small in God's eyes. But they're all big when Jesus does something with them. And so I think working with young people is just one of the most meaningful things you can do. But I'd never worked with fifth graders before, but when you're new, when you're the new teacher, you kind of have to fake it. You have to act like you know what's going on. So a moment came earlier in the school year, about a month into the school year, when I realized these kids were younger than what I was used to dealing with. And a little boy named Eduardo came up to me. And Eduardo is a really cute little kid. He's got like the classic bowl cut, giant glasses. He weighs like 50 pounds with rocks in his pockets. He loves to read. He's really unique in my school in that perspective. Like, he's always reading. He always has books and graphic novels and stuff. And that's actually a problem for me because I teach math. He's always reading in my class. So I always have to tell him to put his books away, which never feels quite right, like in school for a teacher. Like, dude, stop reading books. You're in school. But that's my job because I'm a teacher. But he comes up to my desk and comes next to me and he says, Mr. Travis, look. And he opens up his mouth, and he grabs one of his molars and just swings it over to the side, because it's like hanging on a hinge. And I have a moment where I break character. I'm like, but then I get it together, and I put on my, I've dealt with this 1,000 times before face. And I say, okay, Eduardo, what's the problem? How can I help you? And he says, my tooth needs to come out, but I can't get it out. I pulled and pulled. It's impossible. It won't come out. So I put on my, I know exactly what to do face, and I look him in the eye and I say, Eduardo, do you trust me? And he takes a long moment to think about that, which is smart, because he has no reason to trust me because I have no plan. But he says, yes, and so I say, okay, go get a tissue. I don't know why. I'm just buying a few seconds so I can come up with something. He goes and gets a tissue and he comes back, and I look him in the eye again and I say, Eduardo, do you trust me? And he says, yes. All right, then here's what you're going to do. You're going to look me in the eye. You're not going to think. You're going to take that tissue, grab that molar. I'm going to count to 3 like this. 1, 2, 3, go. You're not going to think. You're just going to do what I say. And when I say go, you're going to pinch, pull, and twist. As hard as you can. I know it seems impossible, but I'm telling you, it's going to work. I don't know that. I'm just hoping that this is going to work. I don't know what I'm going to do if it doesn't work. We'll just do it again until it works. Now, I say you're going to pinch, pull, and twist, and his face goes a little gray. Now, you guys are older. It's hopefully been a while since you lost a baby tooth, so you've probably forgotten what it's like. But teeth are supposed to stay in your head. You've probably forgotten this. This goes against everything in your body. It's so counterintuitive for teeth to come out of your mouth. It goes against everything instinctive in you. It's like cliff jumping, to grab a tooth and pull it out of your mouth. It's traumatic for some kids. It takes a lot of courage. So I can tell he needs a little warming up. So I get down on his level and I look him in the eye and I say, Eduardo, like a man. And I see him kind of steel himself up a little bit. I'm like, okay, you ready? Ready or not, it's time. Grab the tooth. 1, 2, 3, go now, pinch, pull, twist, go now. And I'm still like hyped, yelling, and he's standing there with a molar in his hand, with a big gap in his mouth, like, I did it! It happened! And I'm like, hey! Of course it happened. It always happens that way when this happens. He felt like there was no way he could get this tooth out of his head. He felt like it was impossible. And just that little bit of trust that he put in me, he was able to do something that to him seemed impossible. When I was a kid, I competed in the swim team, and I was actually pretty good in my events, freestyle, breaststroke. I normally placed, and another swimmer out there. But my dad was super into it. He would come to all the meets, and he'd say all these really ridiculously corny things. Like one thing my dad always said was, "I want to see steam." And what he meant by that was, "I want to see you swimming so fast that the water boils and there's steam off the water," which is ridiculous. It was like this huge eye roll, like, "Get away, Dad." But he was always there. Well, this one time we were going up against the dreaded Forest Park, they were our rivals. And the problem with Forest Park is they had a massive team, so we could not beat them because we didn't have enough swimmers to fill all the events to get enough points to beat them. So we lost from the gate, and also they were pretty amazing, so we just hated them. But I was intent upon spanking them in my event. I was going to finish a half a lap in front of second place because I was going to show them that we're better, and they stink. So I get up on the block, the gun goes off, I come off way too hot, I sprint way too hard, I get about half a lap in, my breathing got a little off time, and at somewhere I actually gulped water, which is very unusual for me to do, and I start to flounder, and my vision actually went a little red, and for just a half a second I blacked out. And I sort of like, in this confusing fog, I'm treading water in the middle of the lap, vaguely aware that everybody is just leaving me in the dust. The crowd is like around cheering, but it's all like, in the slow-mo of like the waves coming over my ears. It's all kind of silent. I can just hear my heartbeat. And I'm going down. I mean, I'm so out of breath, I'm not sure I can keep treading water. I get this vision of them like rescuing me. Instead of winning by a lead, I get this vision of them pulling me out of the water. I think about diving under the lane markers and swimming for the side and just getting out because I don't even think I can finish this lap. And then I see at the end of the lane my dad. He's kneeling down, he's looking me in the eye, and he's shouting something. So I slow down just enough to hear it, and he's saying, "Slow down, breathe, finish. Slow down, breathe, finish." And I looked him right in the eye, and I didn't think about my coach who was going to be upset. I didn't think about my teammates who were going to razz me. I didn't think about the crowd who was watching, and I didn't think about my competitors who were leaving me behind. I just looked my dad in the eyes and did what he said. I slowed down, I took a breath, and I finished. Didn't think I could possibly do it, but that little bit of trust in my dad, I was able to do it. I say all this because you are going to go through a time in your life when things seem overwhelmingly difficult, where something requires your courage and you don't feel like you can do it, or when the challenges seem too difficult and you're not sure how you could get through them. And in a room this size, it's safe to say that some of us are there right now. And I want you to know that if you can trust someone bigger, you can do things that seem impossible. And if you will place your trust in Jesus, you might do things that actually are impossible. Now, I'm not talking about necessarily the Jesus that pops in your mind when I say the word Jesus. And I'm not necessarily talking about the Jesus that has been represented to you by your grandmother or the church you grew in or whatever, although maybe. I'm talking about the real Jesus. I'm not talking about the goody two-shoes, follows all the rules, never has any fun Jesus. I'm not talking about the overly intense, never blinks, takes himself way too seriously Jesus. I'm not talking about the super gentle, soft-spoken children's Bible Jesus. I'm not talking about the super chill surfer dude, whatever Jesus. I'm not talking about the ancient Yoda Jesus with his legs crossed, quoting fortune cookies. Now, I'm talking about the real Jesus who is here right now, whether you believe in him or not. Now, last night we challenged you to follow this Jesus, at least for this week. And if you do, if you have the audacity to focus on Jesus and follow him, Nobody can tell you where he's going to take you. Never in my wildest dreams would I have dared imagine the places Jesus has taken me since I gave my life to him in my 20s. But what I can tell you is this. If you will follow him, you will begin to see him as he really is. Just little glimpses at first, but over time, gradually, more and more, as you become more able, as he makes you more able, you'll see him more and more clearly as he really is. You won't always like it. Sometimes you'll see Jesus as he really is, and I'm telling you, the glimpse of his goodness, his good-natured, creative joy, his goodwill towards you, it's going to make your heart beat a little faster. Other times, though, you're going to glimpse his strangeness, his otherness, his alienness, and your blood will run cold. That's exactly what happened to Peter one dark and stormy night on the Sea of Galilee. This story is recorded for us in Matthew chapter 14, verse 22 and following. It says, Jesus made his disciples, his students, he made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. Now, Jesus has just miraculously fed 5,000 men plus women and children, thousands of people with this little, few fish, a couple loaves of bread. And then he dismisses his students. He says, get in a boat and go across to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And then in verse 23, after he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves, because the wind was against it. Now, this is actually kind of a very scary, desperate moment for Jesus' disciples. He's up on a mountaintop praying. His students, his followers, are in a boat in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, and the wind is against the boat. It's pushing the waves, smacking the waves up against the boat. Water's coming inside the boat. It's kind of a dangerous, scary, desperate situation. It's in the middle of the night. It's the darkest point of the night. Verse 25 says that it's shortly before dawn, which you probably heard the phrase, it's always darkest before dawn. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and cried out in fear. Imagine for a moment that tonight you can't sleep and you get up and you go for a little walk to pray, or maybe you kneel in the corner of your room and you're praying for a little while and you feel very clearly someone tap you on the shoulder, and you open your eyes and Jesus is right next to you, looking you right in the eyes. Imagine that you're driving on the highway late at night. You're going 70 miles an hour. You glance up in the rearview mirror and you see rushing towards you out of the darkness, Jesus flying towards you, looking you right in the eye. Imagine you were on the top of the Empire State Building and you crane your neck to look down the side and you see Jesus walking up the side of the building, of the Empire State Building, looking you right in the eye. Imagine a storm rolls in right now. The sky goes dark. The lights flicker on and off. One of the fluorescent bulbs breaks. Sparks come raining down over the crowd, and in that moment of darkness, Jesus appears on this stage, floats over the crowd towards you, looking you right in the eye. "It's a ghost!" they cry out. They're in the dark. They're fighting for their lives in this boat, and Jesus comes out to them in the night, walking on the water. Immediately he says, "Take courage. It is I. Don't be afraid." Now, if you're going to follow Jesus for any length of time, and if you're at all serious about it, you are going to have moments like this, where you see Jesus as he really is, and it can actually take your breath away. It can be a little scary. Now, usually, I'd say most of the time, it's something that's so personal to you that you couldn't even explain it to somebody else if you wanted to. So, for example, when Jesus first met one of his disciples named Nathanael, he said something very strange to him. He said, "Nathanael, I saw you while you were still underneath the fig tree." And Nathanael hears that weird comment, and instantly he says, "Now I know that you are the Messiah, the one that God sent." Now, what is going on there? People have debated back and forth. I actually think it's kind of simple. I think that Nathanael was under that fig tree, and he was having a private conversation with the God of the universe. And I think Nathanael knew that there were only two people in the entire universe that had any idea that that conversation happened. I think Nathanael knew that he was utterly alone and that only he and God knew anything about that conversation under the fig tree. And then he meets Jesus, and Jesus says, I saw you while you were under the fig tree. And it strikes him to the heart. Seems silly to us, like big deal, okay, you saw him while he was under, but Nathanael knew. And last night we heard about this miraculous catch of fish, and we might look at that and say like, okay, they caught a bunch of fish. I mean, maybe it was a coincidence. I don't really know how net fishing works in the Sea of Galilee. Like maybe this is a thing that happens sometimes and Jesus got lucky, but no. Peter knew. This was a man who had fished that sea his whole life. He knew that this had never happened before. He knew that this was a one-of-a-kind, break the laws of nature miracle, and Peter's the one that fell on his knees and said, go away from me, Lord, because I'm sinful. If you're going to follow Jesus for any length of time, these things will happen. You'll have these moments when a prayer gets answered, when he convinces you in that really unique way that would get through to only you, and you will have the electrifying realization that the Holy One is beside you, and it can be a scary moment. And you might sense him saying, take courage. It is me. Don't be afraid. And I want to say to you, take courage. It's him. Don't be afraid. Because if you can be brave, you might get to do something that's impossible. Peter, well, we've come to our character for this week. Peter says, Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on water, and came toward Jesus. Only two people in history that we know walked on water, Jesus and Peter. Imagine that. This guy, Peter, with all his faults, clumsiness, puts his feet in his mouth. One moment he's got it right, the next moment he's got it dead wrong. This guy, the guy like all the rest of us, this guy walked on water. You know the bragging rights that walking on water? He got to walk on water in front of his friends. That's a lifelong bragging rights right there. Whenever they're arguing about anything, about who's the best at anything or what God has done through them, Peter can always just walked on water, friends. You remember that time? You were in the boat? You're all freaking out? It was me walking out there. But then something went wrong. Verse 30, but when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out. When he saw the wind, when he saw the way the wind was driving the clouds towards them, the way it was ruffling their clothes, the way it was buffeting the waves, when he saw the flecks of foam spraying them, hitting them in the face, when he heard the way the waves were smacking on the boat, when he saw the water coming over the side of the boat, when he saw the wind, when he took his eyes off Jesus, he began to sink. Whew. You just read the biography of every man and woman who has ever followed Jesus in the history of the world. When he was focused on Jesus, it was like he was walking on water. But when he put his eyes on his problems, he started to sink. When she was focused on the chaos around her, the waves were dragging her down. But when she focused on Jesus, it was like she walked over the top of them. What is it that distracts you from Jesus? What is it that pulls your attention? What are the wind and the waves in your life? Is it that girlfriend that you left home that's really not into any of this, but she keeps texting you, distracting you? You know, maybe you need to take a break. Is it social media or online games, and every time you get a few 5 minutes, you want to be on your phone? You know, maybe you need to leave your phone in your room and try that. I know it sounds scary, but maybe you need to give that a try. If you know that is wind and waves in your life pulling your eyes off Jesus. Maybe it's your image. You know, are you worried about what people think about you? Are you worried about the way you look? Are you worried about what you think people think about you, and that's really what you're focused on? I know for a lot of us it's relationship stuff. Some of you had a bad interaction with your mom 5 minutes before you left to come to CIY, and you're thinking about that. Or maybe it's somebody in your youth group that rubs you the wrong way. Or maybe on the positive side, you came here, and if you were honest, what you're really focused on is, I hope I meet somebody interesting this week, and that's really what you're thinking about. Is it your past, your fears, your shame? Is it this fall and what's going to happen and the uncertainty of it? What is it that takes your eyes off Jesus? Well, I want to let you in on a little secret. If you are brand new to this whole Jesus thing and maybe this week you're turning over a new leaf or you're going to give this a shot for the first time and you're wondering, what's your first step, what's your next step, I want to let you in on a little secret. This is your next step in your soul's development. Focus on Jesus. Now, if you've been following Jesus for years and years and years, and you've been through it, ups and downs, and he's brought you through thick and thin and challenged you and got in your face sometimes, and you've been real with him, and he's been forgiving towards you, and you've got this tight relationship that goes back years and years, I want to let you in on what the next step in your soul's development is. Let's focus on Jesus. And if you're not sure what you believe, you're not even maybe sure why you came here, or you're just giving it a shot, or maybe you're even outright skeptical and came here really needing to be convinced that God exists or he's real. I wonder if you could just focus on Jesus this week. But if not this week, today, and if not today, maybe the next 5 minutes. When I was an atheist, I was an atheist up until my 20s when I became convinced of Jesus. One of the things that kind of started to open me up was I started to pray experimentally. Now, I would not have called it prayer at that time, but that's what I was doing. I reasoned this way. If there's a God, and if he's all-powerful, and if he sees all things, then if I say something, he'll hear it, and he could choose whether he wants to do something with it. He may not, but he can choose whether he wants to do something with it. So I started to say things even out loud sometimes in my dingy little apartment. I'd say, okay, God, if you're real, make me believe. Give me faith. And he did. Man, if you have the audacity, maybe you're skeptical, if you have the audacity to pray a prayer like that and even mean it just a little bit, if you're open just a little bit, for God to convince you, for God to show up, if you could pray a prayer like that and just watch and see what happens, I wonder if you could do that to focus on Jesus. And if you're hurting right now, if you're going under, if you're drowning, if the waves are pulling you down, well then maybe could you cry out to Jesus? That's what Peter did. When he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me!" And immediately Jesus reached out and took his hand. I tell you what, it's hard to find a better prayer than that. If you ever feel like you need to pray and you just don't know what to pray, that's a great one right there. "Lord, save me!" And immediately Jesus reached out his hand and took his hand. And then they climbed back into the boat. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they had climbed into the boat, the wind died down, and in that calm moment, all of them see Jesus as he really is. Then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." I wonder if today, through all the things that we have planned for today, time alone, time in your small group, fun time, ridiculous stuff, time at meals, but I wonder if through all of that, if you could focus on Jesus, could you take your eyes off whatever the wind and the waves are in your life, set those distractions aside for today, and focus on Jesus? Could you have an honest, real conversation with him where you don't hide and you don't manage your image and you just tell him truthfully exactly what's going on inside of you, and ask him for what you feel like you really need, and then watch and listen? Ask, and you will receive. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. Because everyone who asks receives. Everyone who seeks finds. And to everyone who knocks, the door will be opened. Those are the words of our Lord Jesus Christ. May they be true of you. Amen.